So in this video, we are going to look at the producer surplus. So for the producer surplus, it's the difference between how much a person would be willing to accept for a given quantity of a good versus how much they can receive by selling the good at the market price. So the difference or surplus amount is the benefit the producer receives for selling the good in the market. So if we look at our graph, and we say that the market price or the equilibrium price is this Y value. I believe on here they had it was like $5. So the market price for the item was $5, but a bunch of suppliers of that produce are willing to sell it for less. So some are willing, if this is $2, to sell it for $2, some for like $3, some for $4, some for $4.99. And so the difference between what they're actually getting and what they're willing to sell it for is the producer surplus. And the producer surplus refers to the area between the price and the supply curve. And the price is that equilibrium price, which is that market price that it's set at. If you look at the graph below, it's the shaded area in gray, and it refers to the total producer surplus. So the surplus for all the businesses in the market, when we're talking about a certain quantity. So to explain, there may be hundreds of thousands of businesses in the market for this particular good. We're looking at like one good. Some may have a producer surplus of $3, which is the difference between like here, the 2 and the 5. So it'd be these producers that are willing to sell it at $2. Some may have a producer surplus of 1, so they'd be up here, and it costs them $4 to produce. This means they're further up on the supply curve. Each individual business will have a minimum they're willing and able to sell for. Usually this is the marginal cost. And so this supply curve usually represents the marginal cost. Anything above the marginal cost can be seen as a producer surplus because the firm is selling above the price it costs to produce. Okay. And this is all from the website VoiceWire. So just if I go to in a context of an example, say Royal Farms sells their chicken, fried chicken, and there's other places that sell fried chicken such as KFC and other convenience fast food places. So let's say if we use Royal Farms, if they're an example, and they are willing to sell their fried chicken for like $2, because generally that's the cost that it costs to like make it, but they actually sell it for $5 because that's the market price, that's the going rate generally for fried chicken, then they're making a profit of $3. But then say like KFC is another one that sells fried chicken, but it costs them more to produce, or they're not willing to sell it for as low, so they're more willing to sell it for $3. But again, they can still get $5, so their producer surplus is that difference, which would be $2. Now there's some companies that are going to want to sell it for more than the market price, so they don't have producer surplus if that's the case. So again, this one, the area is like above the supply curve. So it's between the Y value of the point of equilibrium and the supply curve. So it's this region here. And so again, we want kind of to find the area of this region. So to do that, we can find the area of the rectangle, the entire rectangle. So this area of this rectangle would give me this entire region here. And then I can get rid of the area that's below the curve here to get the area that we want, which is where the producer surplus occurs. So to do that, we do the area of this rectangle, which again is like the length times width, and the width is like Q and the length is P, or base times height. And so we take that area of the rectangle And then we're gonna subtract the area under the curve, which is gonna be the integral from 0 to this x value, which we call Q or Q star, of the supply curve. And then we take that integral, and then that gives us this resulting area between the y value of the equilibrium point and our supply curve. So again, we might write it like Q star, P star. Again, it's our equilibrium point. Is however you want to find it, P, capital PQ or Q star, P star. Again, it just depends on what reference you look at. That's our equilibrium point. And then we're finding the area of the rectangle that that point makes. And then we're subtracting out the integral from 0 to Q star. Again, it's always the x value of our supply curve this time. So you have to do, in this case, the rectangle first, because that's the larger area. And then I subtract out the smaller area, which is the opposite of what we did when we did the consumer surplus, because the consumer surplus, the area of the rectangle was what we were trying to get rid of, and that was the smaller area. So they're backwards. And just remember, for these, you should always get a positive number because it's the surplus. So if you didn't, you probably did the wrong order. So let's look at the kind of the same example that we've been looking at, but now find the producer surplus. So we did this before, and just go back for a minute and get the equilibrium point. And we set them equal, and we found the equilibrium point to be 1050 and 129.61. And you could find it again if you needed to. So this is my equilibrium point. And then this problem again says, let the x be the number of items. D of x is 4,200 over the square root of x. And S of x equals 4 the square root of x. And it says find the producer's surplus. And this again is our Q star, and this is our P star, or QP. Okay. For producer surplus, we use that formula, which is Q star P star minus the integral from 0 to Q star of our S of x, our supply curve. Okay, so producer surplus, we always take for the supply curve. So then we do 1050 times 129.61 minus the integral from 0 to 1050 of 4 the square root of x dx. So if I just get our area, so 1050 times 129.61 gives us $136,090.50. And then we have to take this integral. So to take this integral, I'm going to make it 4x to the 1/2 dx. And again, you may want to like do this separately from your problem so that you don't have to keep writing this part each time. So if we just like find the integral first. So we have the integral from 0 to 1050 of 4x to the 1/2. That gives me, if I add 1, remember we add 1 to the exponent and then divide by that new exponent. So if I do that, I get 4x to the 3/2. 1/2 plus 1 is 3/2 divided by 3/2. If you do 4 divided by 3/2, that's like 4 times 2/3. You multiply by the reciprocal when you divide. Again, you can divide it in your calculator if you're not that great with fractions. Just make sure you put parentheses around the 3/2. And so that gives us 8/3. I'm going to put my bounds that I still need. So we have 8/3 x to the 3/2 from 0 to 1,050. So that gives us 8/3 1,050 to the 3/2 minus 8/3 0 to the 3/2, which again is 0. So if we do 1,050 just in your calculator to the 3/2, which means that we're taking the square root of that cubed, that gives us 34,000, sorry, and $23. And if I rounded 2 decimal points, 89 cents, and I'm gonna multiply that by 8/3. And that gives me 90,730.37. Okay, so this is the integral that we found. Okay, so up here, did that on the side. I'm gonna come back here and kind of plug that in. So I have $136,090.50, and then I'm gonna subtract the integral that we got, which is 90,730.37. And if I subtract those, I get the producer surplus. So this is my answer of 45,360 and 13 cents. And so that's the total producer surplus that this company would get for this good, or the companies that are willing to sell this good would get. So that's the example of producer surplus. Please let me know if you have any questions.